So gold, silver, and even the stock market is going parabolic right now, setting new all-time highs on Christmas Eve. But Bitcoin, well, it's still stuck under $90,000. So today we're going to be looking at why Blackrock might have changed Bitcoin's market cycle, as well as exploring a new thesis or a new theory that might help us explain what is going on with Bitcoin and what 2026 might bring for us, because it's absolutely undeniable. Bitcoin is the only asset right now not rallying. And I think the best place to start today's show, Nico, is looking at something called the PMI cycle. So this is
Why is
a little
Bitcoin?
bit of a traditional finance concept, but essentially the chart we're going to be breaking down, it shows us what the economy is doing. And what's really interesting is we can see when this green line is expanding and when it's going up and it's rising above this very important 50 level. That's the white dotted line in the middle of this chart. This has coincided with Bitcoin bull runs. But what's really interesting about this metric today is it showed that the traditional economy has essentially been in a contraction for the past 3 years. And this is, I think, a cycle that not a lot of people are looking at in the space. Everybody's looking at the 4-year cycle. They're reading the tea leaf astrologies. A lot of people are kind of looking around for explanations as to what's going on with the Bitcoin price. So, Nico, I think I'd love your thoughts. Is it the 4-year cycle? Is it the business cycle? Is it the halving? What is more important for Bitcoin?
Man, I think Bitcoin is a liquidity thermometer. Easy money, it goes up. Tight money, it goes down. And that last chart that you pulled up, Luke, was fascinating because it really, like, if you could zoom in a little bit, and it kind of explains Bitcoin's behavior. And Bitcoin has really never existed in this tight money environment that we've been in for the last 4 years or so. And it kind of explains the price action. Like, we never had this euphoric blow off top. We never had this parabola. It never existed, this cycle. All that's happened is this like kind of slow crawl up. And if you're taking a look at the business cycle, right, you have it pulled up, and you're taking a look at the Bitcoin price, right, obviously there's a very, very close correlation there. And by the way, you're not the first person who's told me this either, Luke. This is the theory for, I know that you had a video lined up with Raoul Paul. There's also other people that have been talking about this as well. And then they've been making the case that, look, the Bitcoin halving actually never really played a part. It all had to do with the business cycle. And the reality is that this entire year, yesterday I was making the case that the Fed has been acting politically. They've been trying to sabotage the Trump administration with these like hawkish policies. Yeah, we haven't been in a QE environment. That changed, by the way, December 1st. And this is why I said yesterday, I'm like, look, I'm potentially bullish heading into 2026 because there's going to be a change in monetary policy. Not only is there going to be a change in monetary policy, there's going to be a new head of the Federal Reserve that's going to want to accommodate Trump's policies, which the TLDR, what that means is money printer go burr. And when money printer goes burr with Bitcoin, that tends to mean number goes up. Luke.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great point. You mentioned it. Trump, we've got a very, very, very interesting 2026 lined up. We've got Trump talking about 2026 stimmy checks. I think something we haven't talked about from this thread yet that we want to break down for you guys today is the idea that the business cycle is no longer a 5-year cycle, because the government is how they act and that 5 years. So we can see Rhino Bits as more wrinkle. This may be longer, higher rates, longer debt maturities. So this has changed 5 years. So could actually stretch that 4-year and turn it into a 5-year. And I just think it kind of all checks out. We've got a new Federal Reserve chair coming in the next few months. We've got QT, as you said, December 1st. And now we potentially have the money printers coming. What do you think, Nico?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, again, I kept telling you guys this yesterday. Look, the cycle is intact until it's not. The reality is that Bitcoin peaked where it normally peaks a certain amount of days after the halving. It seems like that is intact. We peaked at $126,000 in October, but you know, the meme is coming back. You know, the meme that we've heard every single other Bitcoin bear market, this time is different. And this time actually could be different for the reasons that Luke is laying out, that Bitcoin could have potentially been following the business cycle this entire time. Like, I can't think of a reason as to, like, if you are to think about this logically, Luke, like, think about this for a second. This is going to be like the first Christmas since forever, right? Since the inception of Bitcoin, where your great uncle or your grandfather is going to look at you across the table and it's going to start laughing in your face because the S&P, gold, and silver outperformed Bitcoin in 2025. That's a reality. So heading into 2026, and again, we don't have that many days left until the end of the year. Heading into 2026, do we see this massive recovery happening by Bitcoin? Like, do we see Bitcoin heading to back to $150,000? I just don't see that happening. I don't see that as a possibility. Like, it could happen. I just don't see it happening. Therefore, Bitcoin had a very unproductive year. It's down 6 to 8% this year to date. That's not good. And simultaneously, it's getting outperformed by a piece of metal, right? That's not good at all, right? And it's getting outperformed by the S&P 500. So the whole value proposition of Bitcoin is being called into question. Now, with all of that being said, are you trying to make the case that heading into 2026, we're going to have another down year? That's never happened before in Bitcoin's history. You guys know the meme. 3 green, 1 red. Right now, it's 2 green, 1 red, and 2026 is yet to be determined. So, you know, we're laying out the case here. It looks like what has actually been holding Bitcoin back is the general monetary policy. But as we head into 2026 and the Republicans want to keep the House, and you have a new Fed chair that is going to want to accommodate Trump's policies, it would make a whole lot of sense for, you know, Bitcoin to pump. Not to mention the fact that the Trump family owns the 6th largest Bitcoin treasury company. Not to mention that the Trump family, again, benefits tremendously from Bitcoin going up. They have a bunch of bags. They have huge Bitcoin bags, right? So again, it doesn't make sense that the first Bitcoin president that we've ever had, the day that he was inaugurated, the Bitcoin price was 109,000. Fast forward 1 year later into his administration, and the price is down at $87,000. Like, that doesn't make sense at all. And are you trying to tell me that 2 years into his presidency, we're going to be at the end of 2026 and the price is going to be lower? That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And if it does make sense, then bring back Joe Biden, bring back Kamala Harris, because at least during Operation Choke Point 2.0, we were ripping. At least every single year, the price of Bitcoin was higher. You know, we have a pro-Bitcoin president, and guess what? The price of Bitcoin is lower. So again, it would not make sense to me as an outside observer looking into 2026 and thinking, oh, wow, you know, we're just going to have another poor performance. That wouldn't make sense to me whatsoever. The math ain't mathin', right? And I think that's the case that Luke is making, right? Pulling up these business cycle charts that he's pulling up. Luke, this is a great chart. Look at the poor performance. Might as well have bought in the S&P 500.
Wrecked. Bitcoin's been absolutely wrecked, and everybody's kind of searching and they're scrambling for explanations as to why we are seeing Bitcoin decouple from the markets, but decouple to the downside. I think that's the thing that a lot of people are being confused about. we've all been waiting for Bitcoin to decouple to the upside. And I still think that is going to happen. I still think, like, from a year from now, maybe 2 years from now, Bitcoin is going to be much higher than it is today. And I still expect it to surprise most people to the upside. But the next 3 months, I have no idea what is going to happen. The markets kind of look like they're on an edge. But something interesting, Nico, that I want to show the guys is, I think, even if you are convinced right now that Bitcoin is following the traditional 4-year cycle, let's assume, the argument that Ben Cohen makes from Into the Cryptoverse is we've topped, we're headed for 12 months of a bear. Even if you believe that, I would encourage you to just be prepared for something different to happen. As we've said, that's the most dangerous words in investing. This time is different. But we do know, I love this chart, it's my favorite. It shows us that Bitcoin's best 10 days each year outperform the other 355 days combined. So what does that mean? That means that Bitcoin surprises people. And when it does surprise people, it does so really quickly in a way that catches everybody off guard. So that's what those big purple bars are measuring. It's showing us that each year, Bitcoin's best 10 days in the purple is way better than the rest of the year combined. So this shows us that the majority of Bitcoin's gains come from only 10 days. And this is what catches most people offside. Bitcoin is not the stock market. So many people are treating Bitcoin as a swing trade. They're saying, okay, we're down more than 20%. We're in a bear market. I might look at Bitcoin in a year from now. And that kind of ideology and just blind confidence, I think, is going to catch a lot of people with their pants around their ankles. And I think a lot of these old models and old sacred cows, they're going to continue to get destroyed, like we kind of very briefly alluded to in the introduction. I think BlackRock launching the Bitcoin ETFs, it's changed a lot of things already. We know that Bitcoin hit a new all-time high before the halving in 2024. We've never seen that before. And the same as the bottom we set in that 2022 bear market, that was $15,000. That was actually below our previous all-time high of $20,000 in 2017. So I just think we're going to continue to see more and more of these sacred cows in the Bitcoin space get wrecked and get destroyed. And I just think not a lot of people are appreciating how volatile Bitcoin can be in the short term. I mean, that's another narrative we hear, Nico. The institutions are here. That means volatility is going to continue to get smaller and more compressed. Again, it is clear that volatility has gotten more and more compressed over the past 6 to 7 years. That is true, but I'm just not so sure that the trend is going to be our friend forever. And I still think we're going to see a lot of upside surprises.
Yeah, let's talk about those sacred cows, because I think you hit the nail on the head, Luke, right? Every single metric, by the way, that would indicate that we've reached a cycle peak, every single one of them did not go off this year, right? This was the first halving cycle that Bitcoin did not make that Bitcoin made an all-time high before the halving. This is the first cycle that Bitcoin has peaked potentially. Luke, you were mentioning Ben Cohen earlier, that Bitcoin has peaked on apathy. We never had a euphoria phase. Could you imagine that? Like, if I told you back in 2021, we had a euphoria phase, it was cut short a little bit because of the China mining ban, all that stuff, but we still had that euphoric run up, right? 2017, who remember, that was the euphoria of the euphoria, right? If you told me back in 2021, Nico, you're going to wait 4 more years, and not only are you not going to get a euphoria phase, you're going to get blue balled, I would have quit. I would have been like, you know what? I'm going to go find a career in something else, right? So we didn't have the blow off top, right? And as Luke was pointing out with the charts earlier on, it could be because of the fact that, you know what? That Bitcoin never really followed the halving was never really the catalyst for Bitcoin's parabolic rallies. It was always the liquidity cycle. It was always the business cycle, right? And again, when you talk about these sacred cows, there's entire channels. Luke, you and I know this very, very well, right? There's entire channels, and you just saw every single, again, a lot of these people are my friends. I'm not naming any names. I'm guilty of this myself. I was posting pictures of Donald Trump saying 500K in January of 2025, right? But all of these channels, basically the entire community had this consensus that we were going to have this amazing Q3 and Q4 of 2025. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the worst Q3 and Q4 the year after the halving in Bitcoin's history. We are down 22% in these 2 quarters. That's never happened before. You guys have to understand that, right? So we are already in uncharted territory. Looking back in the past, which is human nature, you want to do this. You want to look back in the past, and it's like almost as if you want to grab onto something so that you have certainty heading into the future. That certainty has been ripped away from us. Nobody knows. Luke was mentioning it earlier. We have no idea what's going to happen in the next 3 months. Anyone who tells you differently is absolutely lying to you. Think about all the price predictions, not from just us YouTubers or not from influencers on X, but from these large banks, these large institutions. I'm not going to name any names, but the heads of treasury companies, and they were all calling for $150,000, $200,000 Bitcoin, and all those predictions just got lower and lower and lower as we got closer and closer to the end of the year. So, speaking of sacred cows, dude, those sacred cows got, I can't even say that on YouTube, but they got kicked out, bro. Those sacred cows ain't sacred anymore, man. They don't even make sense to call them sacred because we're in uncharted territory, ladies and gentlemen. This is what I want you guys to understand. It could be because, again, the introduction of the ETFs and Wall Street is playing a lot of games. That also kind of doesn't make sense. The majority of Bitcoin is still held by Bitcoin OGs. It's still held by individuals. So how many games could Wall Street really play, right? So again, this is uncharted territory. We don't know what's going to happen. But as I was telling you guys yesterday, and this is the first time I'm telling you, Luke, I love this uncertainty. This reminds me of the early days. This reminds me of 2017, bro. This is fantastic. Back then, you had no idea whether Bitcoin was going to succeed or not. You had no effing clue. You were like, okay, what are the characteristics of Bitcoin that makes it better money? Well, it's absolutely scarce. It's uncensorable. It's completely decentralized. You can send it anywhere around the world for pennies on the dollar. And people, for some reason, want to buy a really heavy metal, right? Instead, that's what they want to buy instead of Bitcoin. So you can't really explain what's happening right now. Like the fact that the S&P, silver, and gold are mooning while all of us are just sitting on our bags. Like, that doesn't feel very nice, right? So again, thinking that 2026 is going to play out like every other year, even though 2025 completely played out differently than every other, example before it, I think is a pretty naive take to have. So I don't know whether that means we dump even harder. I don't know if that means whether we go sideways. I don't know if that means whether we're just going to go to the moon. But I'll tell you what is the consensus right now? The consensus right now is fear. The consensus right now is uncertainty, right? So what would be the opposite of what everyone is thinking is going to happen in 2026? You know what the opposite would be? Effing rocket ship. We go to the moon. Even telling you guys, imagine 200K in 2026. You guys in the chat say, no, that's hopium. Get the hell out of here. You're lying to me. You would have said the same thing if I told you in the beginning of the year that the price of Bitcoin was going to be at 87,000 in December. You would have laughed me out of the room. You would have told me to go F yourself. In January of 2017, when Bitcoin was at $1,000, if I told you that at December of 2017, Bitcoin was going to end up at 20K, you would have laughed me out of the room. You would have said, no, get out of here. Uncertainty is opportunity. And this is where we're at right now. No one knows what's happening. happening. We're in complete uncharted territory, and that is an opportunity for every single Bitcoin believer, because you understand what the characteristics of Bitcoin are and you understand what the principles of Bitcoin are. Luke?
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I think you mentioned the shiny rock, gold and silver right now mooning while Bitcoin's just acting like a stable coin. What's really interesting about gold's rally, we can see $18 trillion is how much gold's market cap has increased since only April 2025. Now, we know gold and silver kind of sniffs out the money printing before any other asset. We've showed you guys 100 charts that gold moves first, then capital rotates out of boomer digital gold, and it moves into, well, digital gold moves into Bitcoin. So what's really interesting is Bitcoin's what? It's a $2 trillion asset class today. If like 10% of the money that's gone into gold wants to go into Bitcoin, that's already the size of Bitcoin's market cap. So if gold's market cap's gone up by 20 trillion just since April, imagine if just 5 trillion wants to flow into Bitcoin. Imagine if just 2 trillion wants to flow into Bitcoin. I think this is where kind of things can accelerate really quickly. Most people don't know that Bitcoin actually has a multiplier effect. So that means for every $1 that wants to flow into Bitcoin, it pushes Bitcoin's market cap up by somewhere around 6x today in 2025. So if you've got 2 trillion wanting to flow into Bitcoin, which again, I think is conservative, that could easily add 12 trillion to Bitcoin's market cap. And then all of a sudden, Bitcoin's a giant. Bitcoin's 14, 15 trillion dollars. It's approaching $1 million per Bitcoin. And again, those are just conservative numbers. If $18 trillion was added to gold's market cap in the past 6 months, I don't think it's outrageous to say that maybe just $2 trillion of that capital might want to buy the better store of value. And that's, of course, Bitcoin. We all agree on that. We all know that in 10 years, Bitcoin's probably going to be way more valuable than gold and silver, some pet rocks that we've used as money for the past 5,000 years. And I just think anybody trying to make the case that, hey, we're headed for a 2-year bear market, I'm not saying it's impossible. I just think it's unlikely, considering the environment that we keep talking about that is going to unfold in 2026. We've got the liquidity cycle turning. Something else we haven't showed you yet is this chart looking at Bitcoin's price correlated to the year-on-year growth of the money supply. So in blue, this is measuring what liquidity is doing on a year-on-year basis. And we can see what's really interesting is at the end of these 4-year liquidity cycles, you see a massive expansion of the blue line. That's showing us that liquidity on a year-on-year basis is going parabolic. We saw this in 2017. The year-on-year money supply growth was about 14% in late 2017. We saw 21% growth in the money supply in 2021. And right now, we're at about 9%. So again, if this liquidity cycle does lengthen, if we do get these $2,000 stimmy checks from Trump in 2026, if we get a pro-liquidity Fed chair and we get big old Jay Powell booted out of the Federal Reserve, if we do start to see more and more of not QE, that's what they're calling the most recent purchases of US Treasury bonds. We also saw record US Treasury bond buybacks in Q4 2025. If we just see a continuation of that trend, we should see a massive expansion of that blue line. That's the year-on-year growth of the money supply. We got midterms coming. And what the hell is Bitcoin going to do? We saw what it did in 2017 and 2021. It went parabolic. I just think right now, like you said, Nico, consensus, the mainstream opinion in Bitcoin right now is we're definitely headed for a bear market in 2026. I'm not saying it's impossible, but if you look at this thing fundamentally, we've got a lot of tailwinds that I think are just getting ignored.
Yeah, 100%. Dude, I think you hit the nail on the head, man. It's, again, like what is what is the non-consensus view right now? I think that is really what I'm focusing on right now. And just to add a little bit of hopium onto this, the whole, dream of Bitcoiners is for Bitcoin to catch up the market, to catch the market cap of gold. Well, ladies and gentlemen, the market cap of gold just got so much effing higher. I'm going to chat GBT this in the back. Because
it's about 30 trillion.
So what would it, so like, that's more than a 10x, bro. That's like a 15x right now. For Bitcoin to catch, and again, I'm doing this off the top of my head. Please correct me in the chat, guys, if I'm wrong. But for Bitcoin to catch, or Opti, if you're there, just drop it in the chat, please.
I think Bitcoin would have to hit 1.5 million.
So basically a 15x. So $1.5 million per coin for Bitcoin to reach the market cap of gold. And the basic theory right now, the basis of the theory of Bitcoin is that it's superior to gold. I truly believe that it has superior characteristics. It's definitely a lot more scarce. There's asteroids right now floating out in space with tons and tons and tons of gold. There's no asteroids in space that have Bitcoin in them, right? So Bitcoin is absolutely scarce. Gold is not. You can't send Bitcoin gold overseas unless you like pay for the transportation, pay for the security. Even then, they could like replace the gold. They can like wrap the gold, like they can have like a tungsten bar that's like wrapped with gold. Like again, like you guys have seen all the movies of like the gold heists, right? Like all these like sophisticated heists for gold. Like you need banks, you need security guards. Like it's extremely heavy. Like it's a whole shebang, right? It's not easy to send gold, right? It's very easy to send Bitcoin. So if Bitcoin is more scarce, it's easier to send. It's easier to transport. It's easier to custody. It's a superior asset. It's a monetary black hole. That's why I think you've seen the performance that you've seen in Bitcoin over the last decade or so, right? So if that's the base case, right? If that's the base case, if we're just like, okay, Nico, you know what? Forget about the $200 trillion that, Bitcoin could eventually hit one day and blah, blah, blah. Forget about that. Just the base case of Bitcoin reaching the market cap of gold, that's a 15x, ladies and gentlemen, from right here, right? No more than a 15x because we're at $87,000, right? So again, that's an incredible return. And the question is, do you think that that's possible in the next 10 years or so? My answer is absolutely. I would be surprised. I would go even out on a limb and say that Bitcoin has failed if it doesn't reach the market cap of gold. Bitcoin is a failure if it doesn't reach the market cap of gold. That is my base expectation. And the whole industry, by the way, is riding on that. Strategy's whole business model would fail. Simply Bitcoin would fail. Any Bitcoin exchange, their whole business models, they would fail if at least Bitcoin didn't reach the market cap of gold, because that is the base case. The base case is that Bitcoin is superior to gold. We've laid out why that is and where's the opportunity. If gold is mooning, it used to be a 10x, ladies and gentlemen. For Bitcoin to catch up with gold, it used to be just a 10x, right? Now it's a 15x. That's $1.5 million per Bitcoin. And do I think that could happen in the next decade? I think so. Do I think that will happen eventually? Yes. But again, that's the risk that you're willing to take. That is the uncertainty. That is the price that you're paying, right? If it was a sure thing, it would already be at $1.5 million. If the consensus agreed with you, it would already be at $1.5 million per coin. And ultimately, the market price is the truth. It is the biggest indicator of the truth, right? So again, this is the opportunity for you guys. It's an asymmetric opportunity. Is it the same opportunity that it was in 2017 or 2021 when Bitcoin was much lower? Perhaps not. But back then, there was much more uncertainty than there is now. You didn't have the president of the United States going out on Twitter and fat fingering, hey, we want to make the U.S. the Bitcoin capital of the world. Oh, and we have an executive order launching a strategic Bitcoin reserve. None of that was true back then, right? So there was a lot more uncertainty compared to where it is now. So I want to get your thoughts on that, Luke, because again, bro, like, that's the base case, bro. If Bitcoin doesn't reach the market cap of gold, it's failed. Do you agree with that? Do you disagree?
Oh, I absolutely agree. I've kicked the hornet's nest on Twitter more recently, making even more wilder claims than that. For me, I actually think Bitcoin fails if it follows a power law. And again, I get it. People are going to be, typing hate in the comments, and they're probably going to leave this video. But I'd encourage anybody who hears that and they get a visceral reaction to just walk through the numbers for a moment. Like, I fundamentally believe that in 2040, if Bitcoin's still following the power law, it's at $4 million a coin, and it's an $84 trillion market cap. I think that's failed. Because if you actually think about it, global wealth today, it's 900 trillion. It should expand if it's following the past couple of decades of data. Global wealth might be somewhere around 3,000 trillion. So expect about a 3x in the next 20 odd years. Okay, so if the global wealth is at 3,000 trillion in 2040, and if Bitcoin's $4 million a coin, I get it, it's a big number, but that means it would be an $84 trillion market cap asset. That means that Bitcoin would still only be worth about 2% of global wealth in 2040, 32 years after it was created. So I'm going to go a step further, Nico. I think if Bitcoin's digital gold, it's failed. I think if Bitcoin follows the power law, it's failed. Because imagine the world in 2040. Bitcoin's $84 trillion of market cap. It's $4 million a coin. That means we would still have hundreds of trillions of dollars of fiat money. We'd still have government bonds, their market cap being hundreds of trillions of dollars. Do we really think 32 years after Bitcoin was created, the fiat money market is still going to be 2 times, 3 times, 4 times more valuable than Bitcoin? Again, I'm bearish on humanity. I'm bearish on the masses. I haven't touched Australia in 4 years because I am so bearish on the everyday person. But we don't need the everyday person for Bitcoin to break all of these models, the digital gold model, the power law model. If we just continue to see ETFs, Blackrocks, sovereign nations, Michael Saylors continue to do what they've done over the past 2 to 3 years, I think we won't be having this conversation about digital gold by 2030. I think it's going to be all over. Bitcoin's probably going to be breaking all of these models to the upside. There's going to be no Bitcoin left on exchanges. And I think we would all regret not buying more Bitcoin today at $87,000 a coin. Because I think when all this is written in about 5 years' time, I don't think it's going to matter whether you bought Bitcoin at 87, 127, or who knows, 57. I think it's going to be a rounding error, and I think Bitcoin's going to surprise to the upside. So couldn't agree more, Nick. I think digital gold is a failure.
100%, man. I think I 100% agree with you. I think it's going to surprise everybody to the upside. The minimum it's going to do that, because if not, look, and this is what I've told everybody, like the success of Bitcoin is binary, right? Like it either goes to 0 or it keeps going up. Like it doesn't just stay the same and stay in its same place. Like that's not how it works at all. Like this thing is either going to the moon like a rocket ship, or it's going to 0, right? And I refuse to go back to the fiat system. The fiat system is slavery. The fiat system is a continuous debasement of your purchasing power. It takes away your hopes. It takes away your dreams. Bitcoin brings all of that back, right? So again, just because we've had a lackluster 2025 doesn't take away the fact that, look, I think Bitcoin's best days are yet still ahead. And that's what that is my base case. That is my base expectation. And again, just to catch up gold, that's a 15x. And with what Luke was saying, that's much more than a 15x. And again, to think that isn't going to happen in the next, not financial advice, I'm just telling you what I'm doing. If to think that that's not going to happen over the next decade or so, I mean, like I just think that you haven't read enough. Like I don't think you've done enough research, right? Like I don't think you've read the Bitcoin Standard. I don't think you've seen enough of Luke's videos. I don't think you've tuned into Simply Bitcoin enough, right? Anyways, guys, it's going to be an incredible show. We still have tons to cover. We're going to be right back in just a little bit. Today's episode is brought to you by Bitcoin Well Infinite. If you're a serious Bitcoin buyer, you've probably hit the same wall. Most platforms make you give up custody just to play by the rules. Bitcoin Well Infinite fixes that. They're North America's only publicly traded, non-custodial OTC desk listed on the TSX Venture Exchange, which means transparent operations and zero counterparty risk.
You buy Bitcoin, you take immediate control, period. For trades over $50,000, you get a dedicated executive Bitcoin advisor, competitive spread starting at 1%, and immediate delivery straight to your own wallet. No custody risk, no withdrawal fees, just institutional grade execution with full asset control. If you want to buy Bitcoin the right way, book a free consultation at bitcoinwell.com/OTC or email infinite@bitcoinwell.com.
I want to give a shout out to our partner, StampSeed. Is your Bitcoin in cold storage really secure? Are your seed phrases really secure? StampSeed's do-it-yourself kit has everything you'll need for you to hammer your seed words into commercial-grade titanium plates instead of just writing them down on paper. Paper is fragile. Titanium plates are strong. Your words are actually stamped into the titanium plate with this hammer and these letter stamping tools. Once the words are in, they aren't going anywhere. No risk of the plate breaking apart and pieces falling everywhere. Titanium stamp seeds will survive nearly triple the heat produced by a house fire. They're also crush-proof, waterproof, non-corrosive, and time-proof. And now you can customize your titanium seed plates. You can upload your design or logo and they will laser engrave it on the back of your seed plate, the opposite side of where the words are. Stamp your seed on StampSeed and use promo code SIMPLY to get 15% off anything on the stampseed.com store.
All right, everybody, we are back. I do want to give a shout out to our sponsor. Guys, go to stampseed.com, use promo code SIMPLY, get 15% off. This is their 12-word seed plate. Highly requested by everybody. Of course, they have the 24-word seed plate as well. Again, you don't want to write down your seed words on paper. You want to stamp them into titanium only on stampseed.com. Use promo code SIMPLY. Again, promo code SIMPLY to get 15% off. At the time of recording, the Bitcoin price is $87,340. Block height 929,309. Market cap 1.74 trillion. Bitcoin versus gold market cap 5.45%. Decline from all-time high negative 30.8%. And the clip that I wanted to pay for you guys is this Chad clip from Chad Saylor talking about how his company, he's like, look, he basically, I'll be honest with you guys, he's just calling everybody a bunch of sissies, because he's basically said, like, look, I've lived my company going down 99%, and I'm the only Fortune 500 or you know, public company executive that has been able to survive that. So, you know, I know what it means to hodl. Basically, I'll let you guys listen into what Saylor had to say.
I'm unique in a couple ways. One, I'm the longest lasting CEO of a publicly traded enterprise software company. I lived to see 99% of my peers quit or lose their job. But 99% mortality rate amongst my competitors. They all sold out over the course of 20 years. That's one interesting thing. The second thing is we did implement a capital structure so that the founders could pursue the mission of the business without volatility impacting it. And third, I'm not proud of this, but I'm the only public company officer, maybe the only public company CEO in the history of the world that actually lived to see his stock decline in value by 99.8%. My stock went from $333 a share to 42 cents a share. I kept my job, but if you were on my board of directors, you probably would have fired me if I did not have a controlling stake in the company. I kept my job and I kept the company, and I didn't dissolve it and sell it off to a megacorp to become the 167th division of IBM. And that's why I'm here today. So, people HODL, hold on for dear life or whatever it means, right? I get it, right? It's pretty obvious, but I find it's a joke, when people get on crypto Twitter and they talk about how they might have to sell if Bitcoin trades down 5%, or it's like, you guys haven't lived through anything, right?
I mean, Chad Saylor. Could you imagine, like, one thing, like, I don't think I've ever lived through a 99% correction. That's crazy. And then that was in the 90s. That was the .com bubble, by the way. So like $334, and then it goes down to under $1, and then he basically goes sideways for 20 years, can't compete with Microsoft, finds Bitcoin, finds an edge, becomes the #1 Bitcoin treasury company. His stock goes back up to $500. Now it's down 50%. How could you be bearish on this man? It's like when people talk shit about Elon Musk. It's like, I don't like Elon. It's like, do you know someone else that could land rockets and build self-driving cars? It's like, same with Saylor. It's like, do you know another, executive that has survived the 99% downturn and then turned around his company after 20 years and made it one of the best performing stocks of 2024? Do you know someone else that fits into that category? I don't think so, right? So again, this guy knows what it means to hodl. And if you take a look at his history, he's not only been accurate about how this whole Bitcoin thing has played out, right? And again, I know we're in uncertainty right now. I know we're at a 30% drawdown. I know that everyone's feeling a little bit sad because they had high expectations for the end of the year, but he did accurately predict what was going to happen with the introduction of the iPhone, right? He said that this was going to change the game. He even wrote a book about it called The Mobile Wave, right? And he talked about how this was going to change people's lives. And in the background, I was taking a look at to see if the Primal stream was up. And by the way, shout out to the 2,500 sats. Merry Christmas, everybody on Primal. Appreciate all the sats being zapped to us right now. But I saw a post by Matt Odell, and he was talking about the fact that look, the average 18-year-old in the United States is on pace to spend 93% of their free time looking at a screen. And you say, Nico, what the fuck does that have to do with that thing? And I would say it has everything to do with that thing, because Michael Saylor accurately predicted when he wrote the book, The Mobile Wave, the significance of the introduction of something like the iPhone into people's lives. Think about it. I remember this. I'm old enough. I'm an old man now. When I was in high school, I was a BlackBerry person, right? Like, that was the phone. Like, all you could do with your phone is play Brick Breaker and then BBM Messenger. Like, that was like the extent of what you can do with your cell phone. Think about what you can do with your cell phone today. You could do everything. You can literally press a button, have food delivered to your house, book a flight, have someone pick you up. Like, you can literally do everything on this thing. Watch entertainment, watch some people on YouTube, watch TikTok for whatever reason, get your news on X. You literally do everything on your phone. And Michael Saylor accurately predicted that was going to happen when he wrote his book, The Mobile Wave, right? And if you take a look at these numbers, this is crazy. 93% of an 18-year-old's free time is going to be spent looking at a screen. So if you take a look, if you take into account that pedigree of accurately predicting what is going to happen with all this, technological information, and if you actually take into account what Saylor is saying about Bitcoin and how it's going to transform the world and what it's going to do for humanity and what it's going to do for money, like what Luke was saying earlier about how Bitcoin just following the power law is going to be a disappointment. Like, it makes perfect sense. And again, you would have laughed Michael Saylor completely out of the room back then with all the things that he was saying about the iPhone and about the iPad. You would have laughed him out. You would have been like, what are you talking about? Like, it's just a phone. Like, it's like, what are you smoking? Right. So again, you kind of have to look back into the past, and take a look at his, track record, right? To see, how potentially it could play out into the future. And I wanted to play you guys that clip because, again, that is literally the definition of a true hodler. I've never held through a 99% downturn. Personally, I've never done that before. Usually when something goes down 99%, it does not come back up. Right? Because it gets exponentially worse, guys. Like, look, if something goes down 99%, it could still drop another 99%, right? It could still exponentially get lower and lower and lower and lower, right? That's what people don't understand. Like, it's a 50% drop, but a 50% drop could still drop 50%, and then it could still drop lower than that, right? So anyways, Luke, I'm going to pass it on to you.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of wild. I can't think of many other stocks that have gone down the percent, and not only recovered to the high reached. Yeah, it's priced down 50% this year. A lot of bearish people. When you zoom out, I mean, just appreciate this chart from one of my strategies a big company to having one of the most valuable treasuries in the entire world, which is kind of mind-blowing when you think about it. This chart here is looking at the largest companies on the entire planet. You got Amazon, Google, Microsoft, Apple, Ford, and Meta. We got General Motors. Yes, Bitcoin's been a little bit volatile. Maybe strategies slip on at the time of this live stream, but even zooming out, strategies, companies, money, cash on hand, their treasury is in the top 10 biggest treasuries in the entire world. It has been absolutely vindicated. Their Bitcoin treasury strategy playbook, it is going to be adopted by all of these companies in the future because their only option to stay ahead of strategy or have more money than strategy is to buy more Bitcoin than strategy. Because if Bitcoin's number does continue to go up, strategy's treasury will continue to go up. And if it does reach this number one spot, which I think it will in the next 5 years, it'll overtake Berkshire Hathaway with that $410 billion giant treasury. Every single company on this list will be forced to pay attention to what strategy has done, because it's not only gone from nothing to, $100 billion market cap. It went from a 99% correction and crash after that 2000 dot-com bubble mania blew up to now being one of the biggest companies in the world. I think this is something that so many people forget. And I don't think a 50% correction along the way is going to change strategy's thesis. Strategy has the technologically superior way to store capital. It is Bitcoin or it is nothing. Nico, you actually got me thinking about this earlier. Not only is gold a terrible store of value if you look at it on a 50-year chart, but it is impossible to take across borders. You can't take more than $10,000 of gold across a border. And if you do, if you try to snuggle a couple of, what are these, nuggets up the wazoo to try to cross a border, you get caught. There is no way to use gold as money on a global level. As you can see, that doesn't look comfortable, trying to use gold as money to cross a border. Anything but comfortable. You sneeze and all of a sudden you hear some nuggets hit the airplane, hit the floor. I mean, this is why we Bitcoin. And I think it's very easy to get caught up in, short-term corrections and noise about the price. Yes, strategy's down 50% this year, but I think, hey, when we zoom out in 2 to 3 years' time, I think all of this will be noise, and I think it'll be very, very clear which companies have a winning formula and which companies are sitting on melting ice cubes. I think it's going to be as simple as that.
Absolutely. All right, everybody, we're going to be right back in just a little bit. We're going to hit the news. Tons to talk about. I know that the Samourai wallet developer, I know that he surrendered last week, but again, we can't forget, we still got to keep putting the pressure on. So we have an update. And again, I want to talk about the significance of this case. There's an amazing article written on Bitcoin Magazine. We're going to cover it for just a little bit. And then during the culture segment, we're going to go down memory lane. And I want to tell you guys about my experience with Luke Mikic. We're going to talk about his YouTube channel and just go back and talk about just YouTube, how it's changed our lives in general as content creators, as Bitcoin content creators. Things weren't as, as they are now. In the very early days, there was no one, right? So we're going to be talking about I'm like losing my train of thought. We're going to be talking about all of that during the culture segment. So you guys are going to want to stay tuned, smash the like button. We're going to be right back in just a bit.
I want to give a shout out to our partner, Ledin, the leader in Bitcoin-backed loans. Unlock the liquidity in your Bitcoin without having to sell your Bitcoin. They've issued $9 billion in loans to over 10,000 customers since 2018. I absolutely love these guys. Not only do I have an account with them, but I also have a loan. And what I love about them is that there are no monthly payments, and you could pay back the loan at any time. As soon as you send your Bitcoin as collateral, you'll have cash in your account within 24 hours. Over 1,000 five-star customer reviews, and they've never lost a single dollar or sat of customer money. Go to learn.ledin.io/simply today, and you'll get 0.25% off your first loan. I want to give a shout out to our partner, sat123.com. Sovereignty isn't just about your money. It's about your communications too. When the grid goes down, most people go dark. Cell towers fail in hurricanes, cyber attacks, and blackouts. But satellite phones? They don't rely on local infrastructure. Iridium has 77 satellites in orbit, giving you a direct line anywhere in the US, even offshore. If you hold your own Bitcoin keys, you should hold your own comms too. Sat123.com also has everything you need to start building your Bitcoin citadel. Starlink, battery backups, Faraday bags to protect your hardware wallets, and much, much more. It's a one-stop shop for anyone serious about resilience and off-grid independence. Stay connected, stay independent, stay sovereign. Go to sat123.com/simply today and use promo code SIMPLY to get 15% off anything on the store. I want to give a shout out to our partner, BitKey. If you already self-custody your Bitcoin, you know the deal with hardware wallets by now. Complex setups, clumsy interfaces, and a seed phrase that can be lost, stolen, or forgotten. BitKey fixes that. BitKey is a multi-sig hardware wallet built by the team behind Square and Cash App. It packs a cryptographic recovery system and built-in inheritance feature into an intuitive, easy-to-use wallet with no seed phrase to sweat over. It's simple, secure, self-custody without the stress. Time named BitKey one of the best inventions of 2024. Get 20% off at bitkey.world. That's BITKEY.world with the code SIMPLY.
All right, everybody, go to bitkey.world today. Again, not your keys, not your cheese. This is literally the easiest hardware wallet to use on planet Earth. Again, it has multi-sig built in. It has inheritance built in. It's built by our friends over at Block that also built Cash App as well. Again, all you got to do is you put your fingerprint, you tap it with your phone, bam, bing, bam, boom. You're ready to spend your Bitcoin. If you scan the QR code on your screen or check the link in the video/podcast description and you use promo code SIMPLY, you'll get 20% off. Go to bitkey.world today. Take self-custody of your Bitcoin. The BitKey is literally one of the easiest devices while not sacrificing security or sovereignty in order for you to do just that. All right, everybody, let's get into today's news story. What am I talking about? First, let's give a little bit of context. So, ladies and gentlemen, we've been talking about this for over 2 years now. We've been talking about the Tornado Cash case, and we've been talking about the Samourai wallet the Samourai case. We told you guys when the Tornado Cash case was happening, no one cared about Tornado Cash because it had to do with Ethereum. No one really knew what Tornado Cash was, but we were telling you guys when it was happening that it was going to set a very dangerous precedent if the government won the case. Why? because essentially it would open Pandora's box and it would allow the government to basically say, listen, if you build open source software and for whatever reason criminals decide to use that open source software for criminal activity, you, the software developer, are responsible. If you want to know why Satoshi disappeared off the face of the planet and why he's anonymous, that is why. If Satoshi was not anonymous, he would probably be in a jail cell today, right? So again, this is a very important case to cover. This is a very important case to highlight. And right now, as it stands, it's extremely unfortunate. The Samourai wallet developers right now, Keon had to turn himself in. So right now he is in a federal camp. He's in prison right now, which is terrible, right? This has been brought up to President Trump. I have the clip for you guys right here.
Mr. President, this week a man named Keone Rodriguez is going to federal prison for creating crypto privacy software. The case was started under the Biden administration, but your DOJ kept it going and secured the conviction. A lot of people in crypto are saying that this man should be pardoned. Are you familiar with the case at all, or would you be interested?
I've heard about it. I'll look at it. Why, you think he should be pardoned? Sounds like it. Sounds like, based on your question.
Many people in the
Rodriguez, we'll look at that, Pam. Okay, let's take a look at it. You know, you'll have to tell me.
So yeah, again, President Trump, Bitcoiners got you elected. We're not very happy about this right now. But this article kind of lays out, you know, what's at stake, right? So pardoning the Samourai developers. Well, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I'll do like a general review. Pardoning the Samourai developers would restore legal clarity and protect non-custodial code. The Samourai wallet matter raises a fundamental question about how the United States treats non-custodial software and the developers who create it. The Samourai wallet developers did not operate a financial service or handle customer assets. They wrote and maintained software that allowed users to construct collaborative Bitcoin transactions in a privacy-preserving way. Throughout the tool's entire life cycle, users controlled their own keys, initiated their own transactions, and never relied on Samourai or its developers to transmit or safeguard value. The distinction between a custodial service and a non-custodial tool is not a technicality. It is the core bank boundary that the Bank Secrecy Act, FinCEN guidance, and decades of regulatory practice used to distinguish software authors from regulated financial intermediaries. The key word in all of this is the word intermediary, because the way that the system is built today, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it whatsoever, is that the system is built so that banks and any of the apps that you use, they function as enforcement arms for the state. Right? So if you think about what a bank account is from a Bitcoiner's perspective, essentially it's a 2 of 3 multi-sig, where the bank holds a key, the state holds a key, and you hold a key, right? Think about it that way, right? If you want to use kind of like a Bitcoin analogy, right? And essentially, the reason that they went after the Samourai wallet developers was not only to make an example out of them, but basically say, listen, it doesn't matter whether, you know, this person wasn't holding your money, but what they did was that they enabled you to regain some type of financial privacy and some type of sovereignty. They weren't actually interested in going after them because, you know, they were facilitating money laundering. Why do I know that? How can I say that with so much certainty? Because when banks do the exact same thing, they get fined. When open source developers do the same thing, guess what happens? They go to jail. There's a 2-tier system. The reason that banks get fined is because they can control banks. The reason that open source developers go to jail is because they can't control open source developers. That's the reason, right? And that isn't justice. If there's a 2-tier system, by definition, that is not justice. That is injustice. And by the way, I always read you guys this passage, but I'm going to read it to you guys again because I think it's very applicable here. It comes from the book, The Sovereign Individual, that predicted all of this was going to happen. How did they predict this? They predicted predicted that information technologies was essentially going to take a tremendous amount of power away from the state. And we've seen two things get taken away, or disintermediated, better said. The first thing is information. You guys remember the censorship. You guys remember the X files that were released, the Twitter files that were released, where even in the United States, where freedom of speech is protected by the First Amendment, you had the US government reaching out to social media companies and censoring the free speech of American citizens, right? Why was that happening? It was because before the internet, the government basically had a complete monopoly and control over information flows because there was only a handful, I'm going to use the word again, a handful of intermediaries to tap on. Think about before X. Think about it before YouTube. Think about before Facebook. How would you get your news? There was a handful of newspapers. There was a handful of TV stations, and that was it. Now with the internet, there's millions of people online constantly creating their own content, speaking their truths. It's not a coincidence that the most popular broadcaster on the face of the planet is a broadcaster by the name of Joe Rogan. That's not a coincidence, ladies and gentlemen. That is the new age. And that is exactly what the book, The Sovereign Individual, was talking about. And he was making the case that, listen, it was going to be very difficult for them to control the narrative like they've been used to being able to in the past. Now, the same disintermediation is happening to money. And now the reason that the stakes are so much higher is that the government's monopoly on money is their source of control. It is their source of power. So it doesn't surprise me that they react this way. It doesn't surprise me that the Samourai wallet developers got arrested and got convicted for writing privacy open source code. Like they're basically the government basically made the case that the Samourai wallet developers are responsible for criminals using their software, right? That's the case that they made, right? Anyhow, so let me read you guys this again. This was written in 1997, and boy, did they get it right. Businesses that offer the services that facilitate the realization of autonomy by individuals will be subject to infiltration, sabotage, and disruption. Arbitrary forfeiture of property, already commonplace in the United States, where it occurs 5,000 times a week, will become even more pervasive. Governments will violate human rights, censor the free flow of information, sabotage useful technologies, and worse, right? And by the way, this phenomenon isn't just happening in the United States. This is a worldwide phenomenon. In Europe, they're censoring information. Where our boy Luke is from, they're censoring information. They're censoring social media. So again, this is going to continue to happen, but you have to understand why it's happening. It's happening because essentially the internet freed the bird. The internet opened the cage. The internet has allowed free and open communication, and by doing so, it's now enabled technologies like Bitcoin to have this free and open monetary system. Now, what it is revealing in the process is like, wait a second, hold on, like, we had this understanding that you guys would have the monopoly over money because there was no other better way to do it, because it would get corrupt. You don't want private citizens issuing their own money. But what happens when there's a protocol like Nostr or a protocol like Bitcoin that comes into the scene and says, hey, wait a second, not only can we do money better, we can actually have a system that has rules without rulers. Well, the rulers have to justify why they should be rulers. That's why you're seeing the reaction from central banks towards Bitcoin. That's why you're seeing the reaction from governments towards social media. They feel very uncomfortable. Rather than adjusting their own behavior and their own incentive structure, what they do is that they use their monopoly on violence, they double down, and they try to say, listen, you're the bad guy. You're the person that's doing wrong. We don't have to change your behavior. You have to change your behavior. You have to own nothing and be happy. You have to eat the bugs. There's a 15-mile limit that you can travel and no more than that. Anyways, Luke, passing it on to you, bro. I have to cover this case, man, because what happened to the Samourai wallet developers is a tragedy.
Yeah, absolutely. Before I get to the Samourai case, I think everything you say makes a lot of sense. again, I don't think all of the craziness that we're seeing in clown world is like a political issue. So many people are trying to attribute political answers to what is very clearly an economic and a technological phase shift. At very basic first principles, governments all around the world today have more debt than they had all the way back in the 1940s during World War II. And a very easy way for a government to pay back its debt is to steal the money from the citizens. But to get the citizens on board or normalized to having their wealth stolen, you need to pass all of these crazy laws and you introduce them slowly, piece by piece, over time. You can't just instantly go from 0% taxes to 50% taxes, 20% property taxes, digital IDs, tracked transactions. Everything you do is bagged and tagged and given to the tax authorities. You can't just make that leap overnight. You need to create lots of problems, or you just, once a problem arises, you make the most of it and you take as much power as you possibly can. By the way, the book, The Sovereign Individual, written in 1997, when they were talking about how technology would change the world and how entrepreneurs and business owners would start moving to tax advantaged countries and start operating their businesses in cyberspace where they don't get taxed 50 or 60% from their local countries. The book actually predicted a way that a government might, try to stop the people fleeing their home countries and moving overseas would to create a lockdown situation. Again, this book was written in 1997. Now, I need to be careful with what I say, but I think all of the craziness we see in the world, all we're seeing is governments trying to normalize the idea of stealing money, capital controls, and outrageous taxes because they have a very simple economic problem. They have an enormous debt burden, and as millionaires and business owners leave their home country, this creates a flywheel. This creates an exponential process because in many countries and states in America, the top 1%, they pay 50% of the taxes. If all your millionaires are leaving your country, like in California, for example, 300,000 people are leaving the state every year. In the UK, 15,000 millionaires are leaving the country every year. If your most productive parts of society is leaving your society, they pay all the taxes, what happens? The government already has an enormous economic problem, and the technology that we have today that enables the business owners to leave only creates a flywheel, and it makes the problem worse. This is why the countries with the most amount of debt, think about them: Canada, Australia, the UK, the PIGS countries in Europe, Portugal, Italy, Greece, and Spain, France. Think about the countries with the most debt, and then think about which countries have the most bananas, mind-bendingly stupid laws and policies. It's a perfect correlation. I don't know of a country heavily indebted who is not going down crazy lane. So again, I don't think any of this is political answers. And I think, sadly, examples like this that we're seeing in the Samourai case, they're going to continue to happen. And it's not because our country's, operating under conspiracy theory, or they're, they certainly could, but I think it's much easier to explain all of the craziness from basic economic principles and basic technological principles. It is very clear they're incredibly scared of digital money and digital communications in the same way that the printing press liberated society and democratized information and decentralized information, the same way that that technology fundamentally changed society in the late 1400s and the early 1500s. We saw the separation of the church and the state. It's what we talk about all the time on Simply Bitcoin. But what happened? The church and the state fought a 20-year war against those people who were trying to create this technological revolution. Be very prepared for something similar to play out if we are trying to separate money from state. A lot of people think this is going to be a very easy process. I don't think so. And again, I'm not being a doomer. My money is where my mouth is. I'm not living in a Western country until this monetary transition has fully played out. So again, I think sadly, examples like this, even in America, what's supposed to be the freest country around the world, they will continue to happen because of the economic and the technological realities that Nico brought up with the sovereign individual.
Absolutely, 100% spot on, Luke. It's a symptom, right? Like these societies are not these are not political. These are not. It's not ideologues, right? These are governments, right, that are heavily in debt, that are reacting, and they're using ideology as cover. By the way, they're using anything. Their only excuses are suffering from inflation, but 100%, they're symptoms of these societies being so heavily indebted, and they're symptoms of the fact that now we live in this brave new world where essentially, if you're a successful person, you can literally get up and leave, right? You can take your wealth with you. That's the power of Bitcoin. Like Luke was pulling up an article of I'm gonna use the Australian term because I love it, of the gold and the wazoo, right? Now you don't have to put your Bitcoin in the wazoo. You can memorize your Bitcoin instead of doing Opti pulling that up. Thank you, Opti. Oh my God, that must have been painful. But the point I'm trying to make is you don't have to do that anymore, right? You don't have to do that anymore. You can memorize your seed word if you're in a pickle. I don't recommend that, but you can memorize your seed words or memorize your seed phrase, and you can take your money with you cross borders, or you can move to a more favorable jurisdiction. This is what the book, The Sovereign Individual, was all about. They were making this case, right? And the internet has enabled this. It has allowed this. Before the internet, remote work was not possible. What we do right now, for what Luke and I do for a living, would not be possible. It wouldn't be a viable a business model. It would literally be impossible. The only equivalent would be we would have to go to a TV station. We'd have to get interviewed. We'd have to get we would be unemployed. I'll put it to you that way. Right? Because that would be the only way for you to broadcast to an audience, right? So again, the internet has completely changed the playing field, and governments are slowly reacting to it, and that's why you're seeing them clamp down. That's why you're seeing them double down instead of them facing the reality and saying, "Wow, okay, now we have competition." Because this is the theory from the sovereign individual. They're basically making the case that over a long enough time period, what Luke is waiting out is that eventually governments will come to a realization and say, listen, like if we're not competitive with country A or country B, our most productive citizens, as Luke was mentioning, are going to leave to those countries. They're going to take their money with them, and they're going to take their tax revenue with them, right? We now have to incentivize those people, those productive individuals, to come back to the country. How do you incentivize individuals to come back to the country? Well, Salvador just laid it out for you. What do? You protect private property. You increase security. You create an environment where if you're an investor, you feel confident that you can invest in that country without getting scammed, right? That's what you do. That's how you attract capital. That's how you attract productive people. And I think that's the phenomenon that we're seeing on a global level. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, the best part of the show is still left up. We're going to be talking about Luke Mikic's channel, Bitcoin content creation in general. It's going to be awesome. Let's get to the culture segment. We're going to be right back in just a bit.
I want to give a shout out to our partner, HIVE Digital Technologies. Fueled by clean energy, HIVE has quadrupled its global Bitcoin mining footprint and channels that same scale into high-performance compute, where their AI cloud is now ranked #1 in the world for network performance. At HIVE, you've got dual engines, Bitcoin and AI humming, roaring, accelerating in unison. They're lean and mean, they're green and clean, and they're rewriting the playbook on sustainable digital infrastructure. You can catch the latest buzz at HIVE Digital Tech or at HIVEDigitalTech.com. I want to give a shout out to our partner, BitcoinBend.io. If you're into freedom, Bitcoin, and building a real community, this is for you. Gain exclusive access to real-world, members-only private clubs across the globe, featuring poker nights, expert-led classes, co-working spaces, educational meetups, live events, and more. Current locations include Sarasota, Nashville, Boston, Dallas, Las Vegas, and St. Louis, with new clubs launching soon in West Palm Beach, Scottsdale, Alabama, and beyond. Not to mention Bitcoin Ben's resorts in El Salvador. There's 3 of them, and they're absolutely beautiful. You'll also get access to the first fully backed Bitcoin bank with fiat ramps and savings accounts. It's called Private Key Bank. And you guessed it, it's based out of El Salvador. Go peer-to-peer with Bitcoin bulk buys. Tap into home equity for long-term Bitcoin growth. And join their exclusive mining pools if you're interested in mining. What are you waiting for? Head over to bitcoinben.io. Join today, where Bitcoin meets freedom.
All right, everybody, we are back. Guys, if you're tuning into the Simply Bitcoin channel and you're not subscribed to the Luke Mikic channel, you're missing out on a bunch of great content. Guys, I've known Luke for like half a decade at this point, and I remember the early days, and I remember basically seeing someone that was, I saw the talent very, very early on, and just watching his journey, his career path has been fantastic to see as a content creator going through that journey myself. Content creation is not easy, guys. Like, you guys see the final product, the polished product, but you guys don't see all the bullshit, for lack of a better expression, that happens behind the scenes. You guys don't see the amount of time that you spend with editors, the amount of time that you spend setting up these live streams for them to perform the way they do, and all the things that come along with it. And I really got to say this from the bottom of my heart. Luke is literally one of the best in the industry, specifically in the live stream aspect. This kid is incredibly talented. He's fantastic. I'm a huge fan. And go subscribe to his channel. Go check out the Luke Mikic channel, hardcore Bitcoiner. And he's got some surprises for you guys in the new year in terms of content that he has laid out for you guys. So I wanted to give a shout out to Luke. We were all talking about what we were going to make the culture segment on when we were preparing the show. And I was like, we're going to make it about Luke, right? You guys have seen me and Opti go down memory lane and talk about the early days of Simply and setting everything up. But yeah, I want to go down the memory lane of the early days of Luke Mikic. I remember you first started making content for Coinbeast. I remember that, and then I remember from my time at Swan, I would approach the CEO, and I'm like, dude, we have to get this kid. He's so talented. He knows what he's doing. And then of course here it's Simply, you do some work with us as well. Like it's been fantastic, man, to really team up with you and make this content together, and to just see, to borrow Nick Carter's expression, see your star rising, man. It's been great to see. But I'm gonna call it, and I was right. I was right as hell. Simply Bitcoin, tomorrow's Bitcoin news today. I saw this from day effing one, man. I called it from day one. I'm like, this kid's going to the moon.
Stop it. Far too kind. Firstly, thank you for the kind words. I don't think I deserve them yet, but I appreciate them. And I mean, honestly, I'm just glad that I've got a dream job. I can travel anywhere around the world. I can do whatever I want, whenever I want. And I mean, we get to just talk about Bitcoin on Christmas Eve. I mean, for me, that's a dream job. And I just think, as we continue transitioning into this digital age, I think more and more other people will be able to become, to the book, sovereign individuals and do what they want, when they want. They can earn in Bitcoin, save in Bitcoin, and most importantly, talk about things that we're actually passionate about. Again, I think that's a massive gap in the market that we both identified. Again, Simply Bitcoin, you guys were one of the first people making Bitcoin only content in 2020. And I watched you guys start and I was like, oh shit, this is so true. When I first started trying to learn about Bitcoin, like way back in 2017, there was no Bitcoin only education. It was crypto scammers trying to sell you a trading course or the next 100x shitcoin. And I was like, I just got lost in the noise for a couple of years there in 2017. And I think Simply Bitcoin started Bitcoin only education. And I think that's just, it's a massive gap in the market right now. It's super easy to make entertaining content, but I think educational content, it's a completely different beast. Anyone can make a 60-second entertaining video, but doing a live stream for an hour and a half, it's completely different. So again, thank you for the kind words. I'm just glad, making content, talking about Bitcoin and only Bitcoin, I just think it's a dream come true. So again, it's great to learn from people like you, Nico, and get to do whatever we want, whenever we want. It's beautiful.
I appreciate the kind words back, man. And let's talk about the escape, because that's part of your branding, Luke, right? The 9-to-5 escape artist, right? And I think this is what a lot of people have not fully comprehended. Like, they might feel stuck in their situation, but the reality is, guys, is that and I'm going to connect this with what we were talking about during the news. The internet has changed the ball game, right? So you can work remotely anywhere around the world. If you are providing value, you don't necessarily have to be tied down to a physical location, right? So again, this allows you to reclaim back your time, and it also allows you to work on something that you feel passionate about, as long as you're providing value to others. If you're providing value to others, you can monetize that, right? And then it's just a matter of scaling it. And then that allows you, again, to reclaim back your time, and it allows you to choose where you want to live, which is very, very important. And by the way, this phenomenon just started happening in the last 2 decades or so. Before that, it was literally impossible. I would say in the last decade, really. It was literally impossible. You would not be able to do it. And if I told you that I had this sophisticated plan of, oh my God, we're going to create a media company and stuff like that, when I started Simply Bitcoin, I'd be lying to you. I was extremely lucky. I was in the right place at the right time. There was product market fit. There was a gap in the market. And again, if you fulfill a need, right, it's like basic economics 101, right? People want it, right? It's like supply and demand, right? So if you're providing a service that people want, you're able to monetize that. You're able to build a business out of that. And Luke, I've seen you do that as well. And then again, that's allowed you to live life on your own terms, and it's allowed you to live where you want to live, which I think is very, very important, right? And I think, Luke, I want you to talk about that, because again, some people perhaps feel stuck where they don't need to feel stuck. They don't need to play the game that perhaps their parents played. They don't need to play this traditional 9-to-5 just to get by. There are much better alternative options. And not only that, you'll make a lot more money with those alternative options. Like, you got to think bigger, and this is only possible because of the internet. If you're able to leverage the internet to make a living, there is no ceiling. Like, there is no ceiling on what you can do. Obviously, this requires a tremendous amount of training, of practice, of repetition, of iterations. You have to be confident in yourself to fail in public. Go take a look at my first Simply Bitcoin video. Go take a look at Luke's first videos. You'll see for yourself. But over time, guess what happens? You end up becoming really, really, really good at it because you've done it for so long, right? So yeah, I want to talk about that, Luke, because it is part of your brand. It is part of who you are, right? 9-to-5 escape artist. What are you seeing that most people don't see?
Probably a hair comb. That's probably something that chat will throw in there. Let me, on a more serious note, let me talk a little bit more about, why YouTube, why Bitcoin. This will all tie back to Bitcoin at the end. But I think you kind of nailed it. The internet's fundamentally changed the game. My entire thesis of my book is kind of making the sovereign individual more digestible. So we've lived through like 3 major technological transitions or revolutions that completely changed society. When the agricultural revolution started about 10,000 years ago, for the first time in human history, we had excess. We created capital. We had wheat, grain. We developed money. And this is all because of the agricultural revolution centralized society. When we started creating machines that helped us grow food and pick food, we fundamentally changed. We transitioned from hunters and gatherers, which we did for hundreds of thousands of years, and we completely changed and we centralized into these agricultural societies. If you wanted jobs, if you wanted wealth, you went and lived in the villages with the kings and the queens. Then the Industrial Revolution came about 10,000 years later in the 1770s. This completely changed society once again. If you wanted a job, you had to move to the big mega cities like London, New York. You had to move to where the machines and the factories were. And this is what created the 9 to 5. Again, so many people think the 9 to 5 is normal, but it's literally like a 150-year phenomena. The idea of working in an office or working on a factory machine line, it's 150 years old. It's existed for like 0.005% of Homo sapiens existence, which is the wild thing. And now we're living through that next big technological transition that the book, The Sovereign Individual, calls the transition from the industrial era into the information era. And this one's interesting because for the first time in human history, this is a decentralized revolution. I don't have to move to the agricultural villages for economic opportunities. I don't have to move and get centralized in these big cities like London and New York for the economic opportunities. I can work from anywhere around the world on a laptop. And very importantly, if I provide value, I can capture a market. I can get paid for providing value to society. So this is kind of like my whole thesis for starting a YouTube channel and talking about the things I talk about. Firstly, I just love Bitcoin, and I think it's the most important technology. It's the most humanitarian technology in human history. So I think it's going to help more people than anything else. But I think it's the most important thing to understand because this is the biggest technological transition we've lived through. And my entire thesis for YouTube is you just got to do something that's hard. You've got to do, again, this is where, supply and demand comes into things. It's very easy to make a highly edited, highly produced 60-second video and make it very entertaining. You can get a lot of views doing that. Or talking about crypto or trading or get rich quick schemes. You can get a lot of views by making entertaining content. This is what Mr. Beast does. He makes entertaining content and it's great. But how much value do you actually provide? That's the bigger question. And this is why I like to make educational content, because it actually helps people improve their lives. Of course, Nico, you know this. It's not the most profitable. You certainly don't make the most amount of money. You certainly don't get the most virality. If we were doing what we were doing for views or money, we'd be talking about something completely different. Educational content is not where the money is, but you can still make a lot of money and escape your 9 to 5 if you are operating in a blue ocean. Again, there's an amazing book, Blue Ocean Strategy. Essentially, you want to go and provide value in a region where there's no competitors. And in the Bitcoin-only educational arena, there is nobody making Bitcoin-only educational, which is why Nico and I do what we do. We like to educate people about Bitcoin, not only because we love Bitcoin, but because there's nobody else doing it. Somebody has to do it. Somebody has to provide value. And when somebody does provide value, that is where it can become profitable. So again, this is kind of like the whole thesis here on YouTube. Again, something else that's interesting about the transition from the industrial age and the information age is in the industrial age, there was no opportunity for somebody to make outsized returns by working in a 9 to 5 office or a corporate job or working as a cog in a machine on a factory line. The normal, income, it followed like a bell curve distribution. So the majority of the people, 66% of people on each side of the bell curve, they pretty much earn the same amount of money. It's very difficult to earn that outsized return when you're working in industrial era jobs. Now, this holds true for everything. This holds true for lawyers, engineers, doctors. I had a look the other day, 60 to 70% of all doctors earn between like 250 and 400K a year. I mean, yes, it's great, but once you take taxes on top of that, it's very difficult to get seriously rich just working in these industrial era jobs. It follows a bell curve distribution. And this is where digital jobs is probably not the best word for it, but jobs in the digital age, creating content, helping other people create content, this is completely different. Income in this, it follows something like a power law, where 90% of the capital or 90% of the economic opportunities, it's paid to the top 10% in that industry. So again, if you find somewhere where there's no competition and you're in the top 10% just by de facto, 90% of all of the economic opportunities and income distribution, it goes to the top 10%. So this is why out of the world's richest people, look at them. What do they all do? Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates, what do they all do? They create digital companies in the digital age. The reason why the rich are getting richer, it is because the monetary system is broken. But that's not the only thing we're living through today. We're living through a technological transition where people working the 9-to-5 jobs, it's very difficult for them to earn 100K or 200K or 500K a year. But all of those opportunities are in the digital age. So again, I could talk about this for an hour. It's like the whole thesis of my book. But I think it's an interesting concept to ponder if you are about to go to university for 8 years to become a doctor. That's not the way to succeed in the information age.
100%. And I'll drop some tidbits for you guys. Like the most successful people of my generation, so like early 30s and below in Bitcoin, they all have one thing in common. They're all college dropouts, every single one, right? Myself included. Like if I were to look back on like one of my best career decisions, it was dropping out of school and going all in Bitcoin. And of course that led to, first it was mining. I wish I would have stuck to that. And then it eventually was content creation, right? So, but again, it's what Luke was talking about, where you have these asymmetric opportunities that, normally you wouldn't find them. And the internet there's so many of them on the internet. But the thing is, they don't teach you this at school. That's why this is why it's so valuable. To hone in on these skills, because anything that they teach at school, it's going to be commoditized, right? So like basically like it's going to have a value to it because essentially there's a factory, right? That is producing people that are, I don't want to, that's a very bad way of saying it, but basically like, that there's going to be a certain amount of people with that skill set that are going to be joining the labor force on a yearly basis. That, right? That's what the universities do. But there's so many skills online that you cannot go to school to learn YouTube. The only way you learn YouTube is by putting in the years and learning the platform. And then all of a sudden I could tell you, I will tell you in 30 seconds. If I look at someone, I would say that person knows what he's doing. He's a YouTuber. I can literally tell you. But it's because I've put in the time to learn the platform, right? And again, this applies to X, this applies to YouTube, this applies to Rumble, this applies to Instagram, this applies to whatever. I mean, look, you guys saw the fight the other day. You had one on Rumble and you had one on, I think it was Netflix or something. Logan Paul, I mean, he lost, but he made tens of millions of dollars off of that fight. How did he even get himself in that situation in the first place? He built a massive following. That's all he did, right? And then, of course, he built this massive following. All of his followers want to see him get in a fight and stuff like that. They hyped it up. That's what I'm talking about, and that's what Luke's talking about with asymmetric opportunities because of the internet. And the internet has enabled this. There's so many of them, and it's just a matter of you capitalizing on them. And again, you can't go to school for this, right? That's the thing that I have to tell everybody. Like, you can't just go to university, get a 4-year degree, and then apply to a job. And then no. You have to take action. You have to take agency. You have to take the risk. and the confidence in yourself and the naivety to do it. Because if this Nico told old Nico 5 years ago all the bullshit he had to go through, I would have been like, maybe I would have done something different. But if you power through it, sometimes it pays off. And of course, there's always ebbs and flows. There's ups and downs. But again, I think it's all worth it at the end of the day. And it's in Luke's bio, right? 9 to 5 escape artist, right? It's about escaping that whole 9 to 5. Because again, guys, like, think about it. You only live once, right? You have one life, and you know your working ages are between the ages of 20 and then mid 60s. Do you really want to spend that under, you know, fluorescent lighting, like, you know, in a cubicle? Like, do you really want? Like, I think of that and I'm like, dude, that sounds terrible. And again, if you do that, I'm not speaking ill of you. You got to feed your family. You got to do what you got to do. But again, you know, there's other options in this day and age, and it's because of the internet. Before the internet, none of those opportunities existed. And if you do have an entrepreneurial bone in your body, if you do feel like you're not content with what you do, some people love what they do, right? The internet is the way out. I'll leave it at that. Anyways, if you guys enjoyed today's show, you know what to do. Smash the like button. Consider subscribing. Go check out Luke's channel. Go stay tuned for his book that's going to be dropping very, very soon. Guys, we love you. We'll be back tomorrow for a brand new episode of Simply Bitcoin Live.
Today's episode was brought to you by BitcoinWell.com, a Bitcoin-only platform on a mission to enable financial independence.